You are now entering PaleoRadio.
Welcome to PaleoRadio with your hosts Jeremiah Bannister and Joe Elder.
What an amazing day it is to be alive, my friends. I'm Jeremiah Bannister.
And I am Joe Elder.
And you're listening to Paleo Radio right here on 95.3 FM, 1680 AM in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Listen, folks, we're a fantastic show, and we've got a call-in number. So if you're interested at any point to take part in the conversation, it's super-duper-duper easy. 616-656-1680. And in fact, we've said, what was it, just last week, Joe, we told people you ought to just put it in your phone.
That's right.
Yeah, speed dial that.
Just throw it in the phone. You know, it's going to be the easier way to talk to us every single Monday, like you would love to do, and we know it. And again, yes, the number is 616-656-1680, and we have just a whirlwind of topics today to go over.
And I know that people are calling in like crazy just to flirt with my wife.
That's right.
Yeah, because she's the call screener. I think that's why she's over there.
Yes.
Yeah, she's smiling at me. She loves me.
To answer all those calls, exactly. But yes, we do screen your calls because of the Illuminati conspirators that come after us, the ones that know that we're a part of Bilderberg Group but pretend to give the facade of being some middle-class white fellas.
Yes, the Paleo-Naughties. So right here, we have a whole bunch of these topics, Joe, and we have one that's actually kind of extensive, but it's a big deal, and it's been a big topic in the news. It seems to be all over Facebook and Twitter, but it's about the Muslim ban, and we actually talk about something from the Guardian. We also talk about, what's the other one, man? We have a guy, Turley.
Yep.
Jonathan Turley, where he talks about the constitutionality of it. And then if we've got time to go over the list of terrorist attacks that have happened since 9/11, and it's actually an interesting list. As I was going through and looking at it, I was like, this is really fascinating. But to talk about how many of those actually came from any of the places that are on the ban list for Donald Trump, with Syria and Iran and a number of these other countries.
Yeah, so basically we want to talk about, is it legitimate to call it a Muslim ban in the first place? We want to have that discussion. And then after that, it's a breakdown of, is this ban actually going to do what its purpose is, which is if it is to stop terrorism, is it going to do that? Is it stopping previous, or would it have stopped previous terrorist attacks based on stopping them from coming in and vetting and that sort of thing? So it's going to be a very interesting topic. We're also going to talk about how the Doomsday Clock has been ticked forward by scientists.
Yeah.
That's going to be pretty intense.
Pretty frightening. We're going to talk about religious freedom and a lot of the people and concerns that are going around about the Religious Freedom Protection Act and what that means, as well as a feared and, in fact, projected mass exodus of immigrants from Mexico to the United States, in fact, because of the policies advanced by Donald Trump.
Yes. So, I mean, that's a very interesting topic that we're going to get into. If we have some extra time, there's one that I'd like to talk about, which is the U.S. military probing more into the Navy SEAL attack, or the attack that happened here in, I think it was in Yemen.
Oh, yeah.
And so we want to cover that. There is a article that we discussed that's basically saying they're looking into it and it's on faulty evidence. And I want to at least have maybe 5 to 10 minutes to discuss the abruptness of the choice to go into Yemen at the time.
And then we've got a super special guest, Joe, at 11 o'clock.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
We have Mike Logan, who is a Detroit comic and a comic extraordinaire here in Grand Rapids. He's going to be participating in Laugh Fest and is part of The Funniest Person in Grand Rapids. And he's going to be joining us in studio for about 15 minutes and going to be discussing his comedy, going to be discussing Gilda's Laugh Fest, and maybe stick around to do a couple segments with us. We'll see.
It's going to be a bunch of fun. You're not going to want to go anywhere. Tell all of your friends and frenemies that the show's on right now live, and of course you can hear it. If you miss it, and it's a big fat bummer, but some people do, if you end up missing it, you can listen on the replay Mondays from 10 to midnight and Sundays, the following Sundays, from 10 to noon and 10 to midnight again. All right, Muslim ban, Joe.
Yes.
Right out of the gate, man. This has been This is one of those things. I don't normally, and you know this, like I don't go into comment sections on Facebook. Like,
it's a dangerous world to play in.
It is, and for probably almost 2 years, I've had kind of this policy, self-imposed, where I just simply don't really get involved in it. I go on Facebook and I post, and then I leave and do my thing, my life. Right? And sometimes I'll go and I'll see what other people are doing. I'm pretty specific about see first and stuff like that. But now I started going into these comment sections because the debate, in my estimation, as it's playing out, has gotten to a point, even by the nature of the conversation, just inherently it's going to be passionate. Even inflammatory at times, or incendiary. That's a word I've been using. But a big deal. And you brought up a piece from The Guardian that I think is real insightful.
Yeah, this is by Alan Juhas and Mazin Sidamed. Hopefully I didn't slaughter that. Sidamed, I think. But it's entitled, "Is This a Muslim Ban? Trump's executive order is explained." And again, this is from The Guardian. It says, "What has the order done?" And I really like this article because it just kind of gives a quick layout of some different topics for it, some different elements that it brought to the table. So what has the order done? It has suspended the entire U.S. refugee admission system for 120 days, even though it was already one of the most rigorous vetting regimens in the world, taking 18 to 24 months and requiring interviews and background checks through multiple federal agencies. Trump has said he wants more strictures, but not described them.
Yeah. The only thing, and I'm glad it began this way, but I've been doing this, is to say I want to just offer a PSA and say that this needs to be somehow, that the circle needs to be squared on how, on the one hand, we have the most rigorous vetting regimens in the world, and that it does take 18 to 24 months. And yet, at the same time, we have a situation where many of our leaders have gone in the single most important venue for relaying information to our leaders as well as to our nation, and unanimously, in fact. I mean, it's not like there's an anomaly here or just like one, but it seems like a pretty big consensus with more evidence than the Russia stuff that we can vet till the cows come home. Both of these statements are true, right? They're not lying when they say that. Guardian, I don't think, is lying when they say it's the most rigorous vetting regimens in the world. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that people really get how both of those things can be true in this conversation. And I think because of that, there's a lot of conflation, even in the rhetoric, between what people think we're doing and who we're bringing over and the debate as it is. I mean, part of it's taken literally the most hit and poor of the poor.
Well, in Syria, it literally is taking the people that need refugee status more than arguably anyone in the world right now. They need it more than arguably anybody in the world right now.
But the argument, it seems like even just the optics, if you think the way that people share this and they say, we want these people in, it's the most rigorous vetting regimens in the world. When they do this, I don't think that people are fully grasping that in order to qualify for the most rigorous vetting regimen in the world, that you are going to need to have paperwork. You have to. So when we see those throngs of people, the mobs of people, when we see that, the argument really, if we're being honest, the argument is take about 12,000, 50, maximum 50. Let's take 50,000 people out of that. And we're talking about doctors, lawyers, people who have some means of a record, maybe international travel, for example, right? Some kind of a business that allows them. It is not the people who are dirt bottom poor that would make it through that rigorous vetting system because they don't have any paperwork. Mm-hmm. Because on the one hand, yes, people do go through it. On the other hand, they can do that until the cows come home. In some places, unless there's international travel, business, or ripples across the pond, you're not going to have it.
And some of it has to do with when you're talking about optics. When you are a lawyer or a doctor, but you've been homeless for 3 months and your bank account is frozen and you don't have any money, you do not look any different. So what people are, they are looking at a group of people and saying they don't pass my eye test when you're looking at a group of people that have been displaced from their homes for 3 to 5 months. So I think that's the other thing that plays into it. But just like you said, I personally believe, and I have no connection whatsoever with Syrian refugees. I've never seen any type of vetting system for them, but I have seen the vetting system and worked within the system in the United States to come as a legal citizen from South America. And just looking at this system, I will tell you that if it was based on people from South America coming in, I don't think that 50,000 people will even qualify from Syria to come. I don't think we even have close to that number of eligible people based on our vetting system as it is.
Much less the 100.
We promised 100,000. We've brought in 13. 13,000, a tenth of what we said we could do in a year, because the vetting system is actually. I truly don't even, like I said, I do not believe that we even have 50,000 individuals in Syria that would qualify to pass the vetting system that's in place today. And
without the extreme vetting.
As the extreme vetting has been placed on top of that. That's what I'm saying. Without the temporary ban that we have on the 120-day ban, just that alone, I don't think we even have.
How many people, I wonder, and I mean, obviously we're pulling this stuff right out of our rear end, but if we were to guesstimate, how many people in Syria would even qualify at all if all of the people with paperwork that could go through the most rigorous vetting regimens, how many of those people are even there?
Yeah. Well, many people have already came to Europe. I mean, we have a geographical problem. Sam Harris said this last week on Bill Maher, which is very true. We have a geographical difference between us and Europe and how we have to deal with this. And our vetting system, I mean, we're really not comparing apples to apples when we're talking about how Europe is handling it and what's going to go on and what could happen to us, because literally we are entirely different. We don't have the problem with displaced people from a war just walking into our country. I mean, it's not the same.
They'd be placed.
Yes.
I mean, seriously.
Well, and we would struggle with an influx of 2 million individuals into our there'd
be riots
that just walked over. Yeah. You know what I mean? We wouldn't struggle as bad as Germany did, because Germany is it's about the size of the state of New York,
right?
Or maybe it's the upper east side of the states, right? But I mean, like, we would be able to handle it, but it'd be a rough shock, right? But going back into the article, suspended the Syrian refugee program indefinitely. Mm-hmm. The U.S. accepted 12,486 Syrian refugees in 2016, compared with about 300,000 received by Germany in the same year. Since the Syrian civil wars began, Turkey has received about 2.7 million refugees, Lebanon 1 million, and Jordan 650,000, according to UN estimates.
That is, but just playing on what we just said, that they're kind of doing an apples-orange thing.
Yes.
I mean, they kind of are a little bit when they're saying that. They're saying, well, the U.S. has accepted this, Germany accepted this many. Germany's policy is just dramatically different. I mean, it's different than most other countries in all the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, Germany tried to lead. What they did is they tried to lead the way with the union, and they didn't get the response that they wanted back from the other countries. I mean, they took it in saying, hey, we're going to be the hub that will help spread this out to everybody. And once everyone got to Germany, they said, nah, we don't want to help. And so, I mean, it turned that way. But another just small thing to notice, we on the show a couple episodes ago, many episodes ago, talked about how Islamic countries aren't taking in the refugees. And this is kind of blowing that argument out of the water, that Turkey is 2.7 million, Lebanon is 1 million, Jordan 650,000, and our big one that we're saying is our great contribution to this is 300,000 from Germany for Europe. I mean, it kind of blows that whole Western civilization is the more compassionate civilization argument out of the water again.
Yeah, I mean, and they're neighbors too. I mean, and they have many overlapping interests. And, you know, I mean, if we had, I wouldn't judge them too harshly if we had Canadian refugees, you know, and I wouldn't judge them too harshly if they didn't take in as many as we did, but, you know, even if the tables were turned and they were a very rich country.
Yes. But the original argument that was made, and then maybe it was made by myself, was that, when you're looking at if you're looking at these two cultural systems as combative, one was taking in refugees and one wasn't. And now after the game is over, it turns out that that's entirely untrue. 300,000 people actually almost broke the Western culture system, and these countries have taken in millions. So interesting topics. We're going to continue to talk about the Muslim ban, or if we should even call it the Muslim ban, here on Paleo Radio. 616-656-1680. Stick around.
We'll be right back.
Love Paleo Radio? Join the club. Support our work by visiting patreon.com/Paleo Radio today.
Back to Eagle and Dragon.
Welcome back to Paleo Radio, 95.3 FM, 1680 AM. Always here to answer your questions and deliver your hopes and dreams.
We're like a genie in a bottle, bro.
That's right.
Yeah.
We've been discussing the Muslim ban, or even if we should call it the Muslim ban, here on Paleo Radio to start off the show.
You know, this has been a consuming fire for me all week, Joe. And actually got into a back and forth with Justin Schieber. He never finished. I thought my response to him, my question was pretty decent, but he had a lot of people responding to him as well. And what I said wasn't very confirming. But my question was journalistically, right? And it was a lot of people, and it was another friend named Anna as well. I said, but journalistically, when I read stuff, you know, you go on social media, or you go and you check out your favorite sites and you read the stories, and you see these headlines, and they're it's a frame. That's what it is. It's a frame of a policy and of a situation. To use the term Muslim ban, and I remember even Dylan, the listener to the show, you know, to go and have these back and forths where you say, on what grounds is it a Muslim ban? And to hear people say in the first sentence of the first paragraph something along the lines of, it most definitely is a Muslim ban, and then the first line of the second paragraph being something, even though it only includes 12% out of, 88% of Muslims in the Muslim world, quote unquote, they are not included in the ban. Mm-hmm. And I said, so 12% of Islam in the Middle East would be banned.
Yes.
And I said, that's not a Muslim ban.
But
I think it's what you said.
Yes.
And I think you just had the quotation marks backward when you said the Muslim ban being big government travel regulation. Mm-hmm. That's what that is. It's big government travel regulation, but Muslim ban is by definition an all-inclusive statement.
Other than so is radical Islamic terrorism.
No, that's doubly qualified.
Well,
that's a doubly qualified thing.
What a semantical game we get to play with this then. Because, just to think about it this way. You have, I think what we've seen is just like a lake turns over in water. We have now liberals pushing conservatives to say what you mean when you say terrorism. When you say terrorism, you're talking about radical Islamic terrorism. And that's really what liberals are trying to say when they say Muslim ban. And it's because they're saying the defense has said we're doing these 7 countries because it's about terrorism. This is the same administration that when it was running, and even before he was running, the leader of this administration had said very outwardly that we need to call this what it is, radical Islamic extremism. Mm-hmm. And he had said that that's what we need to name what this terrorism. This isn't just terrorism, it's extremism, and it's Islamic, right? And he made a point to say you should include Islamic in there. That's what you're forgetting. Yes. And then he banned 7 countries, and he goes, this doesn't have to do with Islam. This has to do with terrorism, and most people, myself included, perceive that as kind of talking out of two sides of your mouth. I
would have to disagree, and here's why. Is I would say, number one, definitionally, it's just factually true. I mean, when we're talking, if we were talking about Oklahoma, we would not use radical Islamic terrorism, although there's conspiracy theorists out there who would say that. You're the Saudis who there's a theory out there with that. But let's just say it's you have militia. That would be right-wing terrorism. That's an actual category. People can go and they can look up right-wing terrorism. That's a qualified term. In fact, it's much broader than the doubly qualified radical Islamic terrorism. But if you say this is what somebody wanted, and I've heard this a lot too, when people say, well, this is what they wanted it to be, is I say that's the history of politics. One of the reasons why Bernie was so popular and Trump is because people don't get what they want. People vote, and they hear. That's why it trended, this idea that politicians are liars, that they're all talk, no action. That's the force behind that. So people are used to not getting what they wanted. And you know what? Honest to goodness, I'm actually really grateful. In some ways, I'm sad, and I get mad about it. I like people like Bernie, but at the same time, I'm kind of glad that we don't just always get what we want, depending on who we is in the batch. And so the fact that everybody kind of gets 80%, and the question would then be whether or not it's legal.
But I still think it's a deviation from the argument at hand of saying, what's the intent? The intent is to stop more Muslims from coming into the country. It's not to tell me then on air live that the idea of stopping people from coming from Syria is because we're worried about other religions and other terrorism coming from a different religious sect in Syria.
Yes.
Tell me that's why we're doing it.
I'll tell you live right now, and the reason is simple. In fact, it's glaring because we're accepting Muslims. We're accepting the way that people pray, Mr. Cory Booker, by the way. We're accepting the way that people pray from 88% of the Muslim world. Mm-hmm. That demonstrates, and I should add, that the 7 nations that are named in this are from the Terrorist Prevention Act of 2015, as well as the Visa Waiver Program Improvement and Terrorist Travel Prevention Act of 2015, and the revised version in 2016, every single one. And Kuwait has imposed visa bans on 5 of these fellow Muslim countries. We're in decent standing here. So you say there's precedent that is national security. They're not concerned. The Terrorist Prevention Act of 2015, they weren't saying, well, we're going to view these people because of the way they pray. That's why they only listed 7.
Well, I think saying it's because of the way they pray is one person's argument. That's certainly not my argument. I don't think it's because of the way they pray. I think it's because there's been a blurred line between what is radical Islamic terrorism and what is regular Muslim prayer. And I think our president has contributed to the blurred line. I think he contributed it when he was telling our president to say radical Islamic terrorism, and now they won't say that what they're doing right now is focused on radical Islamic terrorism. Or they could, but they won't.
It is, though.
But they should,
because
didn't.
That's what it is.
They only said terrorism.
Exactly.
But that's exactly what it is.
They should say radical Islamic terrorism.
They should.
I'm totally for that. I would use it.
But they won't, because their argument right now is that it has nothing to do with Muslims, which is a joke. That's at least what it's focused on. We've got a caller here on the line. We've got Matthew and GR. Matthew, we do not have very much time, so we just want to get to you real quick. How are you doing today?
Very good. The purpose is so that they can, quote, figure out what's going on. And the reason it's not about Muslims, if you look at it, there's 2 different ways to look at it. You could say that 100% of the people, or just say 100% for easier numbers, of the people that were banned were Muslims, but the intention wasn't to ban all Muslims. The intention was to ban people from these nations from coming into this country who happen to be Muslim.
Who happen to be Muslim?
Huh?
Who happen to be Muslim?
Right.
For the sake of argument, for the sake of argument, if we take what Matthew said and we replace it with something that's not currently relevant, and you say, if the same thing panned out and it was true of Christian people, right? Would it be a Christian ban if the vast majority of Christians are still allowed in, and the ones that are not allowed in are from countries that are listed in reports specific, because of their connection to, let's say, international radical Christian extremism.
Yeah. So let's lay that argument out and say Britain has for 90 days suspended all Christians or all refugee status, or all people coming in from the United States because they think they might be part of Westboro Baptist Church. And just as a precaution, every Christian that comes to the United States, well, number one, no Christian is coming to the UK for 90 days because you all may be Westboro Baptist. Let's just start there. You all might be, so just in case, none of you can come for 90 days. After the 90 days, when you come, once you come, we're going to vet you as if you're part of Westboro Baptist Church. That's why people are saying this is a gun argument, folks. Why do you not take the AK-47? What, Matthew? Why do you have a problem with the government taking your gun?
Why do I?
Yeah, I know we've called on the show before. I know you well enough to know that we believe in gun rights, right? And if I put more laws on the AK-47, what I'm doing is what am I doing? Putting more laws on the law-abiding citizen, right?
Well, no. Confiscation and an outright ban on assault rifles. That is different than...
I'm not talking about... I'm talking about enhanced laws that make it harder for people to get their hands on AK-47s.
Is the purpose of the law to make it harder for people to get it, like an obstacle course that we need to run through, or is the purpose to make the country safer? Because if the purpose is to make the country safer, then I'm fine with that. I've been in the military and I've been in law enforcement, and both times I had to qualify on the weapon before I could carry or discharge it.
Mm-hmm. Same
Even
here.
though I was a military veteran,
Yes.
3 years, when I went to the law enforcement, I was not allowed to touch an AR-15.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I couldn't touch the magazine for it. I couldn't touch anything until I had qualified for that weapon.
Or what
And I
about
had
just
more shooting
handguns?
experience.
Like, do you disagree with... Not to get down a rabbit hole, but do you disagree with open carry in Michigan?
Kind of. I disagree with the people. I disagree with people walking up to the line, like the guy in those YouTube videos that they stand outside of a school with an AK-47 just to get the cops all riled up, and then like, hey, I'm using my constitutional rights. I would never do that because I'm never going to bring attention to myself, because every reasonable person watching that news story is going to say no more open carry. So those type of people probably don't need to be having guns like that.
I want to reel this in real quick and bring it back to this. You mentioned something, Joe, talking about Christians and no Christians would be allowed in. That's just that's not even remotely comparable, because you would have a lot of Muslims who are allowed in. There's no ban. There's zero ban on Muslims that come in from other countries.
In Syria, there's a 90-day ban,
but that's
nobody.
That's Syria.
I'm saying that's one example.
But if you have Muslims from another country, you can't say Muslims because the way you pray, no Muslims allowed in.
You're throwing the way you pray in on your own. That has nothing to do with my argument.
You brought up that they'd be banned for their religion. One more thing, though, in the analogy, you mentioned Westboro Baptist. What if we lived in a society where the vast majority of Americans agreed with the Westboro Baptists? If that was the case, and you and I, we've talked about the Pew numbers, none of this in Gallup numbers, none of this is foreign to us. If we know the numbers of people in these places that believe things that would be flat out illegal here, I mean, it would be you're talking like violent stuff, and some of the stuff is just radically bigoted, and it's trendy. It's what a significant number of these people believe, including 1 in 4 from Syria. 1 in 4, if I remember correctly, that said that it's okay to attack the United States or to do suicide bombing. These are big statistics.
Yep. Stick around, folks. We're going to be talking about the Muslim ban and continue the arguments. 616-656-1680.
Now back to Joe and Jeremiah.
Joe, I got to say something, man. I had an awesome weekend. I got to marry a couple.
Yeah.
Yes.
How great is that?
Dude, it was awesome. It was the third marriage that I performed, and I have another one actually coming up not too far from now. I have a feeling that the next one might be in a roller rink.
Ooh, a roller rink wedding. Huh?
Yeah, so I've had one that was in this beautiful home. I think I mentioned it last week, like $600,000 home guy built with his own hands kind of thing.
Nice.
And the second one was in this beautiful historical building. It may have been the oldest winery in Michigan, I think, or something like that.
Wow.
And it's turned into a museum. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place. This one was in this beautiful dining hall that was actually, it was separated just enough. Everything's kind of connected by stairs. So you can, if you look through If you look to your right, you're going to see a room. You go up these stairs, and so everything's kind of around it. It's all very accessible. This room, intimate room, about 70 people, dimly lit. Not the decorations weren't gaudy or distracting. And I got up there, and the cool thing is Jennifer and Ray Hopper. They are such amazing people, but Jennifer's daughter was best friends with my daughter Samantha from the day that they first met at Door Elementary in 2012 all the way until her final breath. And I mean that serious, hardcore, because Emily has made pictures, right, painted things that are now in my office. So to be able to perform her mom's wedding was a really big deal. And I'll say one more thing, man. There was a song that was created in honor of Samantha.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, and it was actually a listener of this program.
Really?
Yes, dude. A listener of this program reached out to us, and I'm not going to read the message, as tempting as it is, but it's Brad Varner. And so I want to give a big shout-out to Brad Varner because he began the message. It was sent to me privately, personally, not at PaleoRadio@gmail.com, which you should email, by the way. But he sent it to me on Facebook and told me, he said it doesn't mention Samantha by name. It was inspired by the journey that you have. And he said, I just wanted you to know I'm a huge fan of Paleo Radio and what you and Joe do. And that's how he began. It was flattery and praise for Paleo Radio. So we love you like crazy, Brad, for that. And the song's called Caveman. People can hear it. It's by Tangelo, Tangelo, on SoundCloud. And it's called Caveman.
Nice. Which is great.
So we're talking about the Muslim ban, and we've talked about it for a couple segments, and we want to wrap it up, though, right? And if anybody has an opinion that differs or is in agreement with anything we've said so far or are about to say, you can go ahead and give us a call, 616-656-1680. But one of the things, Joe, that you wanted to bring up was about the enforcement of it and how the insanity of the rollout.
Yeah, well, and I have kind of two issues to bring into it. One is the insanity of the rollout, how basically quick and tactless it was. And then the other one is the inefficiency of the countries named per the goal of what it's actually trying to do, like let alone the fact of I personally disagree with it in the first place, but let alone the fact of it being a ban or being the retention. Is it actually applicable? Will it actually achieve the desired results based on previous examples of terrorists that have come to the country from certain countries? So I think it will be an interesting topic to get into.
If that was the measure, what's happened in the past, and I've heard this a lot where people say, well, if we look at the groups that have done things in the past, that should kind of play a big role in what we do right now. Proverbially, that's true, right? Proverbially, it would be true. But if we look at the list then of people who've been involved with terrorist acts who are white nationalists, it's like 3 out of 27.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but yet white nationalism is a big problem, and people focus a significant amount on that. So past, in fact, you've said on the show, if we were afraid of something that would be more immediate, something more relevant, it would be white nationalists. And yet, you have almost as many from these countries. You have 2 from the 7 countries that are listed. No deaths, right, in either case.
No deaths. But they're listed on the terrorist list. They're listed on this notorious thing of that. And then you have white nationalists have 3. Yeah. Well, my argument is not white nationalist. My argument is the most dangerous human being in America is a white middle-aged male, which is it's a sweeping argument, but statistically it's true. And we're one of the largest demographics of men in the country. So when someone says, well, yeah, there's more white men, I'm like, yes, so that would make the stat true. That white middle-aged men particularly are the most dangerous people to run into in the United States.
And by that metric, and this is just one of those things as I was going through and looking at the religions and the motivations of each one, there's a list you can go and see all the ones from 9/11 forward. You say there's a lot of Muslims on there.
Yes.
In fact, 16 out of the 27.
Mm-hmm.
So over half of them are from that. And so on the one hand, when it comes to who to be afraid of, so if we take that same metric, we'd say when it comes to terrorism, it would be Muslims.
Yeah, but what does James Holmes count as? What does Adam Lamb's count as? What does the Columbine shooters count as?
Yeah, those aren't on the.
They're not. Yeah, they don't count as. That's not considered
right.
terrorism. But what happened? What's the end game? People die when they do things, right? What's the MO of a high school shooter? White guy. Mm-hmm. What's the MO of a mass shooter in the United States? If it's not what we consider to be a terrorist attack, or I would say it's a terrorist attack. But I also think that what James Holmes did is a terrorist attack too. I think what Dylan Roof is a terrorist attack. I think what Adam Lambza did is a terrorist attack.
What do you think? And those are good points. What do you think of Jerusalem Post reporting that the Welt am Sonntag paper cites intelligence officials in its report on Islamic State selling, quote, real fake documents to raise money. These sell for between $1,000 to $1,500. In addition to the blank passports, Islamic State seized machinery for the production of passports and personal identity papers. An agency called Frontex is responsible for checking whether passports are falsified or stolen among the refugee seekers. The head of the agency said, however, that they're constricted by the fact that passports from a country ravaged by civil war, such as Syria, cannot be guaranteed as authentic. Lastly, American and European security officials have warned about Islamic terrorists masquerading as refugees to gain entry to Europe. Last month's attack in Paris involved 2 unidentified terrorists who used fabricated Syrian passports to reach Europe. Mm-hmm. So do you think part of it could be explained that way? That could say, hey, listen, these are countries where you have a high concentration of Islamic State and high concentration of problems where people are wanting to get out. And you also have a situation where they've now gained access, and where you have the main group responsible for checking the passports to see if they're falsified or see if they're stolen for people coming in, and said this has actually caused a real problem, and we're kind of struggling on this.
Well, it's the same, and maybe you'll think of this as brushing it off, but it's true. It's the same argument for why we didn't take Jews in 1930 when they showed up on our shore. We said that some of them could be Nazis, and it's true. It's absolutely true what was said. I mean, it's a legitimate fear to have at the expense of the many people that aren't. I mean, when it comes from the argument of saying, well, if we let in 100,000 people and 3 or 4 of them are questionable, it's not worth doing. And I understand that concept. But I also say we have to be making that statement with the understanding that we are letting the majority of those people that aren't involved in it in any way, shape, or form be left to the devices of those groups. And so if you're trying to battle terrorism, this is what I'm thinking. My overall game is I'm trying to stop the ideas of terrorism. I'm trying to radical Islamic terrorism. I'm trying to break down those fundamental ideas. What's an easy way to do that? Well, the number one easy way that I think is the best way is to push assimilation and say the Western countries, when we give people freedom and we give them opportunity, they come to like that. And we have a superior system, so we have morality on our side, and we can do it that way. I think counterproductive to that would be to not allow people to come to the country and allow those people, whether it's right or wrong or whatever, even if it's cautionary, to perceive it like they're being withheld because of their geographical location or their religious belief, and be left into those areas to be recruited and or systematically removed by those groups, I think is the number one way to continue the fight. It's kind of the idea of our current president, I think, has the notion that we're going to go over there and bomb them into submission. And I think you and I on the show have covered that well enough that that's not really a strategy that's very effective. And I think we're trying the same concept if we don't allow more people into the country.
Orlai Corinthios. She's, I guess, assuming a woman. I might be wrong. Over at People magazine, talking about this issue, and points out that it excluded countries that President Trump has financial deals with. I included in the notes, but are not limited to, but mentions Saudi Arabia, Egypt and Turkey, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Azerbaijan. Here's the thing. Saudi Arabia, we've talked about on the show. We've talked about our criticisms of Saudi Arabia, why that we believe they're financially involved. In fact, WikiLeaks seems to indicate that Hillary even knew about this.
Extremely.
Yes, but Saudi Arabia, but they are categorized as a close security cooperation partner. You have Egypt and Turkey. These are major non-NATO allies. United Arab Emirates, that's where U.S. Central Command's forward headquarters and the Combined Air Operations Center are located. Qatar, a strategic ally. We have an embassy in Doha, in fact, and Azerbaijan. Security relationships. We have troops. They've provided troops, overflight, refueling, and landing rights. And over 1/3 of all the non-lethal equipment, including fuel, clothing, and food used by the U.S. military in Afghanistan, travels through there. Mm-hmm. So this person... And this is just part of the rhetoric, I guess, when people are talking about this and they're using phrases like Muslim ban, an all-inclusive, incendiary term that's bound to get people furious and angry. And then you also talk about some of these excluded countries, which these are just a handful of a large number, and to treat them, at least in the sentence, as if these are the only ones and as if, man, look at these are where the business deals are. And you go... Yeah, but number one, there's a lot more countries than just those. And number two, these actually have reasons that make it conflicting because on the one hand, we can say that we have close security cooperation with Saudi Arabia, which is an institutional
Saudi
thing.
Arabia is the number one funder of terrorism in the world.
There's the conflict.
It's not even a conflict. If you're stopping terrorism from coming to our shores and you want a temporary ban to review it, stop the country where it's originating out of, which is our oil deal, buddy. 616-656-1680, folks. Stick around, more Paleo Radio, and we will return.
For debates, interviews, or speeches, contact PaleoRadio at gmail.com.
You love to hate 'em, you hate to love 'em. You just can't get enough of 'em, you sick freaks. Paleo Radio's on the air.
Welcome back to Paleo Radio, 95.3 FM, 1680 AM. Joe Elder and Jeremiah Bannister.
The one and only. Dude, this is hilarious, man. I want to say something about the Super Bowl.
Yes.
Because obviously that was super dope, in my opinion at least. But this right here, this is kind of mind-blowing, man, about the Pope.
Yeah, the Pope wants to put up some dukes.
He wants to put up some dukes. Pope Francis promotes a Catholic-Muslim boxing match in Vegas. He must have been listening to Paleo Radio, Joe.
Yes, I think he was.
Because we talked about how instead of having fights just random in the streets, that we would have boxing matches.
Yes.
And that we would
They're
say,
sanctioned with consent.
Sanctioned with consent so that you can go ahead and do that. So we talked about that on the show, and then all of a sudden, ta-da, the Pope decides he's going to go ahead and have a Catholic-Muslim boxing match.
He totally was listening.
Obviously. So that's the word from the semi-official Vatican media. It comes from Francis himself, who last week announced that there would be a boxing match in Las Vegas between a Catholic and a Muslim on May 7th. And the news was slipped at the end of a February 4th Vatican radio report. So, yes, dude, it would be after. This is proof. I mean, it's right there in the pudding, folks.
Yeah, it would
he
be
was listening,
post-Paleo Radio episode.
And it happened on radio, man.
Yeah.
It happened on radio. Same medium and everything. Obviously true. But a Vatican radio report on Francis announcing at a meeting with sports stars and students the day before that he was convening a second Match for Peace, an interreligious soccer match aimed at demonstrating, quote, that we are capable of making peace with the game with art.
That's a very clever thing to do.
Yeah.
In fact, this is it's not an entirely new idea. Many indigenous cultures to North America, many Indian cultures or Native American cultures did have matches. They would play matches of really highly competitive and physical games to dispute arguments instead of fighting, which is an interesting thing. But, yeah, it's true.
It's better than dueling.
It's better than dueling. It's better than pulling an Aaron Burr, you know. But, yes. So, yeah, it says at the end of the Vatican Radio report, which was also printed by the Vatican Daily, the reporter noted that along with announcing the Match for Peace, the Pope also announced that there would be a boxing match between a Catholic and a Muslim. And so, just like we were saying.
So basically, In putting together this idea, right? And he's like, and I thought it was pretty cool. I remember actually the Match for Peace. I remember that being done. I'm trying to remember. Played in Rome in 2014, right? The first match was played in Rome. I may be getting this confused with the match that happened after the Paris attack, where they had countries come together and play and everything to show their solidarity. But I remember the Match for Peace, though, and the idea of having these different religions come together. There's a whole bunch of them, man. I mean, this is seriously hardcore interfaith soccer.
Yes.
Yeah. It's Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Islam, and Shintoism. And atheists, I guess they don't play a lot of soccer, or there's no atheist
Well,
country,
maybe there's
obviously.
somebody who's playing who's
an
a
atheist,
non-believer
right?
on the team.
Right, there's a non-believer on the team.
But here's the other
token.
thing. I am totally, and I can say this as a non-believer, I'm not supportive of the non-believer groups. Like,
right.
in that sense.
It's
my own, it's the movement. I'm totally not, never have been. I don't believe in getting together to talk about not collecting baseball cards. I don't believe in getting groups together that don't sail kites. You know, the non-kite sailing group. I think having a group of nons is a little bit.
Would you be on a secular basketball team if they played with church basketball teams?
I would
be like the heaven and hell show every time.
For me, I would play in a church basketball league.
Me too, yeah.
I just don't think I have to be I don't have to rep a crew, I guess. Just go play.
So who would be the most hardcore boxers that could be between Catholics and Muslims? I mean, who are we talking about?
I'd have to look to see, because I know that there are some pretty good professional Muslim boxers, but I'd have to look around, because boxing itself has not been nearly as strong as it used to be. Now, if you look at MMA, I could think of the best Catholic versus Muslim fight you could have would be Conor McGregor versus Habib Nurmagomedov, who is a grappler out of Russia who is a Muslim.
Yeah. That would be hardcore. Why doesn't he go that route?
And
can you imagine Pope and UFC?
That's right.
Having old pontifex walking around in the middle of the octagon,
rolling some arm bars, doing some triangles, some rear naked chokes from the pontiff. Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah, and Pope Francis as Don King. Just that whole concept that now he's wheeling and dealing in the boxing circuit.
That would be hilarious.
He's going to have the hair, though.
He's going to organize something for Floyd Mayweather. Just get the big money deal for Floyd.
Speaking about big money deals, dude, the Super Bowl, bro.
Yeah. Ooh.
What are your thoughts about that? I mean, it seemed like there were a lot of sad political commercials, it seemed. Emotional ones. I don't want to just say sad, but emotional, right? That were really moving and touching, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. You also had, and I didn't even see this as it was happening. I guess I just don't care that way. But people turning it into a black-white thing.
When
the game. Like
game.
Sean King and
yes.
Mike Cernovich.
And Richard Spencer. And it was hilarious, man, when he's talking about the white race is vindicated because, Tom Brady kind of thing. And it was like, dude, number 11's a Jew, bro. But he also said that it has the most white guys on the team, and that's why he rooted for them. And
the single most important play, in my opinion, of the entire game, it was pivotal, is the play by number 11. What's his name?
What, Jordan Edelman?
Yes, Edelman. Dude, for Edelman to sit there and have that catch.
Oh, that was a huge catch.
A huge catch, man, where it looked like it almost touched the ground. He's it's in between his fingertips, barely wobbling above the surface, that kind of a thing.
He caught it between a player's legs.
Yes, it was like resting on a leg.
The ball got tipped up into the air over the middle, and he dove for it, and a Atlanta defender dove for it, and he dove and caught the ball between two people's legs, and it bounced up, and then he snagged it again and pulled it in.
Do you think that's one of the all-time greatest catches of a Super Bowl game ever in history?
It's one of the best. The best one, I think, is Givens. Again, it was when the Patriots were undefeated, and they played, I can't recall the game. The Giants, New York Giants, and they had one of the catches was one of the most amazing catches ever by New York Giants receiver. He caught it on the top of his head when he fell.
Wow.
And it put them in position to have the game-winning score. So
it was kind of amazing. As we were watching last night, I allowed the kids to stay up because their school didn't have school in the morning, probably because Super Bowl Sunday is now a holiday. But, to have them up and talk to them and say at halftime, everybody's saying no team's ever come back. And I said, I told my son, I said, remember LeBron? Remember when they were down, and LeBron – everybody said, well, no, these teams, the likelihood that they're going to come back against the Warriors from so far behind is just so it's statistically unlikely that they kind of almost just chalked it up. Like they might win one more, they might do kind of good, but the likelihood that they're going to win just ain't happening. And yet he didn't give up. Mm-hmm. He was ruthless, right?
Yeah.
And his team was ruthless and scrappy, and they won. And to see Tom Brady and to see his team come out, and that I said it's official. I put it on Facebook last night. It's obviously true now for the whole world, for all time. Is Tom Brady's now Rocky Balboa?
Yeah, he's
basically like the movie where Rocky's getting his tail kicked, and then at the end comes back and wins.
Well, and the Patriots, I don't think in all of Tom Brady's games they didn't score in the first quarter.
Right.
In the Super Bowl. But the other thing too is the Pats were favored to win this game. So let's not cut hairs about them being an underdog.
Unless you're Nate Silver.
What's that?
Did Nate Silver have them losing?
Yeah, but
I think 538 had them losing.
The bookies, the bookies in Vegas, they're the ones who you look at, and they certainly had the Pats winning. Now the percentages went down after halftime because of the dismal first half they had. But man, if there's anybody that you think was going to be able to do it, it was going to be Tom Brady, and he did. So.
And he did. And it was just exciting to watch, and the fact that it went into overtime.
Yeah,
it's a first, and then for them to come back that way, it was a really, really powerful thing. And speaking of a powerful thing, Joe, in a matter of moments, we're going to be talking to Mike Logan.
Yeah. Yep, he should be on his way in here pretty soon. Hopefully he'll get here around 11 o'clock. If not, we can stall for a little while and wait for him.
He'll be fashionably, comedically late.
Yes, that's right. But it will be good. We'll be talking about Gilda's Laugh Fest. We'll be talking about funniest person in Grand Rapids and all sorts of treats. And then maybe we can get his take on what he thinks about the ban here.
Yeah, and we can ask him. We can ask him about a whole bunch of this stuff too. I mean, the liberal fear. There's a funny story, man, about a car. A man phones police from the roof of a speeding car to thwart thief. I think that's hilarious. I'd love to hear what he has to say about that. And I know it's kind of reaching way back in time, but man, I heard him do this Robin Leach impression. I'm not going to put him on the spot on the show to say, dude, do Robin Leach. I hate when people...
Yeah.
That's the worst thing, I think.
But he's got some good stuff.
He's hilarious. So, and you can find out more about him. You can go online, check him out. Mike Logan, Detroit comedian. There's different videos of him, different interviews. And actually, I got to go back and see videos as far back as 2012. I don't think I saw anything before then.
Yeah. Well, and he's done a lot of good work. I've had the opportunity to do a couple shows with Mike Logan. And, yeah, the man's he's a talented guy. So it's going to be fun to have him in. It's going to be an exciting time. And, again, we have a lot of other things to talk about. We've got the Doomsday Clock ticking down. We have the Religious Freedom Bill, and we're going to get to expand on that, which I think is going to be some fun.
And we kind of mentioned that a little bit on Facebook, too. And people can go and check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/PaleoRadio. Make sure to check us out at Patreon, patreon.com/PaleoRadio. And, of course, on Spreaker at Spreaker.com/PaleoRadio Show.
That's right. And you can also follow us on social media, Twitter and Facebook, Paleo Radio Show. It would be a fantastic thing if you did. We always like talking with you guys. And, again, stick around. We have Mike Logan after the break, followed by talking about more of the Pope, more of climate change, more of issues with religious sovereignty, all that and more. Stick around.
You are now entering Paleo Radio.
Welcome to Paleo Radio with your hosts Jeremiah Bannister and Joe Elder.
Oh my goodness. It's the second hour of Paleo Radio, episode number 63, in fact. And we want to thank all of our iTunes listeners and all of our Spreaker listeners. You are really the beef in the Paleo Radio sandwich. It's just a fact. We have the greatest listeners in all the world, and they're always coming and visiting us and chatting and posting on our wall and creating cool memes over at facebook.com/PaleoRadio. Make sure to go and like that. We're back here at 95.3 FM, 1680 AM in Grand Rapids. Give us a call, 616-656-1680, if you would like to talk about anything we've discussed so far in the show. I'm accompanied by Joe Elder and, of course, Angela, my gorgeous wife. She is taking calls and fielding calls in the call center. So if you're interested in talking to her, of course, and I know all of you are, 616-656-1680. But
yes,
it's true, man. I'm telling you, she is the hit here.
Yeah, that's right.
Is.
People call for Angela. We all know why.
People call for Angela. They like the sound of her voice. They do. And her smile. They can't see it, but boy, they can feel it in their hearts. All right, Mr. President, don't cave to liberal fear-mongering. Protect religious freedom. And, you know, this is one of those that we really don't know how much we agree with everything this guy is saying. It's by Ryan T. Anderson. You can actually find him over at Ryan T. And that's over on Twitter. He's writing at the Daily Signal. Ryan is the William E. Simon Senior Research Fellow in American Principles at Public Policy at the Heritage Foundation. A draft copy of the executive order was leaked to LGBT groups and liberal media outlets in an attempt to prevent the president from issuing it. Indeed, just this morning at the National Prayer Breakfast, Trump pledged, "My administration will do everything in its power to defend and protect religious liberty." Now, Joe, every time we talk about this, one of the things, and you don't see very often where conservatives who use this language, where they will really make a point to expressly state that this includes every religion.
Yes.
Right? And this isn't really just mainly about protecting Christian people.
Well, because we can see through the thin veil, right, that it is about exclusionary privileges towards Christian groups, which is what it is. One thing I think that is the most notable thing about whenever there is a bill like this is that it gets the government in the game of having to choose what is a religion and what isn't, which is fundamentally opposed to what our ideas are of our government. And so it puts the government in quite a place to give religious freedoms based on, you know, if someone says, well, I believe it to be my religious freedom that I can drop babies from a 3-story window. I don't know, whatever it is. Even though that sounds ridiculous, the government will have to rule on if that's legitimately religious or not. Previous to that, we wouldn't have to deal with it. Or let's say it's an easier one that's more palatable would say, because of my religious beliefs, I don't believe in blood transfusions.
Like the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Like Jehovah's Witnesses.
Right.
And then you say, and the government gets to choose if Jehovah's Witness, they basically will legitimize someone being a Jehovah's Witness or not based on if they go with it or do not. So
yeah. Right here it says, here are some things the Religious Freedom Executive Order would do. It tells the entire federal government to respect federal statutes and Supreme Court decisions that make clear the free exercise of religion applies to all people of all faiths in all places and at all times. Now that's real kind of ex cathedra statement stuff, you know, that it applies to all people at all times, this kind of a thing. But if we're talking just in the United States, obviously, then you'd be saying, yes, we're making clear, first and foremost, we tell all of the government that every single religion, it doesn't matter what religion you are, but they have to respect it, and that this is not merely the freedom to worship. Mm-hmm. But it would be the freedom to live out your religion in your day-to-day life without requiring you to do things that would be at odds with your religion, which to me, you know, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like the Amish do that, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, they say, listen, we want to live our way, and a lot of Muslims do too. A lot of minority religions do too, where they kind of cloister, right? But when you get into a public space that has laws and regulations regarding exchanges of money and contracts and things like that, it gets a little bit murky.
Well, especially because it clouds the sense of community or the public space. For instance, like we talk about this, like baking the gay wedding cake, right? Like, why should someone have to bake a cake for someone who's gay if they have a religious belief against it? You know, and I think that those type of arguments are built upon the idea of what's acceptable in the common space and what isn't. Because in the common space, if you're going to get into the trade of making cakes for people, then you usually have to make cakes for people even if you disagree with them politically or their lifestyle. It typically is not a factor in if you provide them the service which you are publicly providing to the group.
I thought this was interesting. It notes that religious organizations include all organizations operated by religious principles.
Boo.
Not just houses of worship or charities. If this is the case, and I'd enjoy to have this guy on, and ask him questions for clarity. He's a scholar. He's somebody who's done a lot of research on these topics. But I'd be interested then to know how, where would the dividing line then be when you're talking about religious organizations operated by religious principles, because that would be, I don't know. I mean, if you give houses of worship and charity a nonprofit status, for example, and make it tax deductible, on what basis are you granting that to houses of worship and charities if your for-profit, if your business happens to also run according to religious principles and the structure and everything else?
Like Bethany Christian Services.
Yeah.
That's one that runs as a nonprofit organization. It has a religious group to it. Would they get everything? I mean, it brings up some interesting questions.
Yeah, but take a group that's not even a nonprofit.
That's right.
Take a group that says, take Hobby Lobby.
Hobby Lobby.
And they say, because that would be a good example of
Hobby Lobby's a better
that'd
example.
Be a great example to say, well, I'm a religious organization then.
Yeah.
And as a religious organization, I mean, how can I not then apply? I mean, for nonprofit status, where stuff is just tax deductible if you donate loot to.
And that's where the rubber meets the road about the government making a choice on who's a religion and who's not, because then they would have to make those choices. What if what is it? Is Satan's Temple tax deductible? Are they? Do they struggle with that? I'd have to find out.
And to some degree, they do. I mean, the government has to make decisions on religion pretty often. Most of the time, though, they leave the internal squabbles as to what's a religion out.
Yes.
I mean, I don't think you're going to see many cases where there's going to be a question as to whether or not a guy who started a church in his house is really a pastor.
Yeah. Well,
or if that's really a religion that he started.
Well, and look what happened with Scientology. If you guys ever get a chance, Google the celebration that they had when they found out that they got tax-exempt status. They shot fireworks off and dropped confetti from the ceiling and all that, because the goal was to create an industry that could make billions and billions of dollars and not have to pay out anything in taxes. And you can do that through getting a religious exemption status. And so that you get tax-exempt. And so I think that there's a game to be played there, but more importantly, like you said, someone starts his religion in his basement, and he's got 2 or 3 followers, and now he wants to have his house tax exempt because it's a house of worship. What do you do?
What do you do?
Then they get to decide if that person is, and say it's a new religion, say it's a Gwipkowic, the religion. And I'm starting Gwipkowic right now, and I'm going to start it at my house. Joe Elder is, and I want to have tax exempt status because of Gwipkowic, and it's my new
John
religion.
Oliver do this?
He started one.
Didn't he start a religion?
He started a
church.
He started a nonprofit to prove how easy it was to do this, to take advantage of it.
Yeah, so I mean, this is basically saying I would be interested to see how this isn't saying, hey, man, this is a blank check for that sort of activity. It also instructs agencies of the federal government to grant to the greatest extent practicable and permitted by law to reasonably accommodate the religion of federal employees as required by Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. It instructs the Secretaries of Health and Human Services, Labor, and Treasury to grant relief to the Little Sisters of the Poor. This is Obamacare stuff. And others who weren't exempted from the Obamacare abortifacient and contraception mandates. So this would be for organizations and groups, for those who may not know what abortifacient means. It is the belief of many people who identify as pro-life that certain birth control mechanisms that it doesn't prohibit, it doesn't keep impregnation from happening, that you end up having conception, but that it doesn't allow that conceived egg to mature, right, to continue on its course.
Yes.
And so it's discharged at that point. They say that because of their position regarding conception and the ensoulment of a person, they believe that that is abortion. In fact, they say those numbers, according to them, their numbers would be for abortion then would just be astronomical, far more than what are talked about when they talk about abortions that are performed since Roe v. Wade and things like that.
Do you find it odd that religious groups don't have a problem with their insurance companies paying their private insurance companies paying someone who has a private plan to get an abortion? I mean,
say it one more time.
Why don't religious people have a problem with their private insurance companies allowing people to use that same insurance company to get an abortion for their own health care? Now, what they would say is, I don't pay for it. And I would say, yes, you do. You pay for it the same way you're saying you pay for it government-wise. You pay into a pool that's run by a private industry, and it's a humongous pool of people. And from that pool, they can generate lower costs for everyone. And of that pool of lower costs, there's a woman on the other side of the country that has the same insurance company as you, and she needs an abortion. And she's getting to pay for it through the low rates of a contributing amount from you. So how is that any different than the government? I mean, my question is, why don't religious people go after private insurance companies for insuring women to get abortions as much as they do for the government? Because in the layout of your tax dollar or your actual dollars to the company, the same concept is how the person goes about to get it.
Could you purchase, because it was a requirement, and this is something I'm not up to date on, but there was a requirement to purchase health care plans, right, that there was a penalty for not doing this. And one of the things the executive order is trying to accomplish is to say that all citizens have to have the ability to purchase health care plans through Obamacare that do not cover abortion or subsidize plans that do. Was that an option before?
To not be...
Were there any health insurance? Because if there were none, then I can imagine why people would complain. But if there were some that did not, I can imagine people being happier about that.
I know that there are insurance companies that have staggered rates, so sometimes you would be able to pay for more, get more coverage, you would have it, and sometimes you would not, but that falls under the same category as people in Obamacare as well.
Help us out. Answer these questions, 616-656-1680. We'll be back with our guest after this.
Love Paleo Radio? Join the club. Support our work by visiting patreon.com/Paleo Radio today.
Back to Eagle and Dragon.
I'm giving a huge happy time shout out to Tyson. Tyson is enjoying Paleo Radio Show in West Virginia with his owner and good friend Mel. So we want to say thank you, Tyson the cat, for listening to Paleo Radio and allowing our show to put a smile on that cute little face. And I'm seriously, man, you got to go to Facebook, either Joe Elder or Jeremiah Bannister, either one of our pages, and you can see that we're tagged in this super happy, fun picture. And Mel, of course, is one of the Paleo Radio divas. Oh, he's an amazing human being. And dude, you, speaking of social media, Joe, you had some awesome stuff, bro.
Yeah, had a busy old week. Oleksiy Solohubenko, who is actually the news editor of BBC World, he retweeted one of my tweets, which made me feel good and proud and happy. And then this is another one, guys, if you have a chance, you're really active on the Twitter machines, please go and follow Nolan Peterson. It's at Nolan W. Peterson, NOLANW Peterson, PETERSON. He is a foreign correspondent at the Daily Signal, and he's based in Ukraine. And he's been covering the war in Ukraine and basically the escalation of force that's been happening in there. And great work by him. So if you do get a chance, please follow him.
And Adam Carolla popped up.
And Adam Carolla liked one of my stand-up picks, which made me feel proud as punch.
Yeah, it made you feel super proud. And I'll tell you, dude, something that made me super proud, man. I was really, really, really excited about this. I've been going through Samantha's stuff. My daughter, for those who are unaware, my daughter died of brain cancer during the summer. and I'm writing a book called The Team Tiny Dancer Story. And so I'm going through these pictures. I'm going through journals and seeing stuff that she's written. I'm scanning pictures and taking pictures of pictures and everything else. And so as I was going through this, I stumbled on a picture that I'd drawn with her. I was just doodling in my diary. And I have these two original characters, Joe, called Blow Pop Man and Gumbo.
Yes.
Yeah, and Blow Pop Man and Gumbo, I think I created these guys maybe back in like 10th grade, man. It had to be when Blue Raspberry Blow Pops first came out. So like Blue Raz was around. You didn't even have, what is it, the Black Cherry? You didn't even have that yet.
That was old. That was not even invented. Concept wasn't even invented.
Wasn't even invented. So this is old school. This is like when the old lollipops started to kind of venture out into new flavors and everything, and it was one of the first. But I created this character. It's a cartoon character. It almost looks a little bit like Adventure Time a little bit. But I posted this saying that here's something Samantha and I made, and that she used to always joke around that that Charms Blow Pop should see it, and they should include it in their branding and advertising and stuff like that. We always had a ton of fun imagining one day we'd be millionaires. Well, Charms Blow Pops liked and commented under that picture.
Yeah, they did.
So original cartoon characters that I created in 10th grade. I mean, we're talking over 20 years now. Wow. Mm-hmm. But over 20 years since that happened, and they saw it, and this is what they wrote. They wrote, "Beautiful story. So happy we get to be a part of the happy memories. We send our love during this hard time."
Wow.
Thank you, Charms.
Thank you, Charms.
That made my day big time.
You're nice folks.
Like in numerous different ways. So tons of fun on that. We've been talking about this religious liberty thing, and we need to let everybody know that our guest, Mike Logan, comedian Mike Logan, he's going to be here around 11:30.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
11:30 is
so
going to be the better time. So
he's
going to
be in studio, so it's been a little difficult. Is he even from the area?
Oh, yeah.
He's from the area now. Okay, so this may be, I don't know how often he's been to the station, but he's going to be here around 11:30, so you're not going to want to go anywhere. But we want to finish up talking about the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, the rumored act here that's got a lot of people concerned. It instructs the Secretary of Health and Human Services to ensure that all citizens have the ability to purchase health care plans through Obamacare that do not cover abortion and subsidized plans that do. This is what we brought up. It instructs the Secretary of Health and Human Services to ensure that the federal government does not discriminate against child welfare providers such as foster care and adoption services based on the organization's religious beliefs.
Yeah. Well, the thing about that is that those organizations, their religious beliefs stop other people from being able to have foster kids. So it's just it's an interesting game we're playing here where based on your religious beliefs, you cannot allow a gay couple to adopt a child. For instance, if you are the nonprofit organization that's working with kids that are in the foster care system, which most of the time it is religious organizations that are working with those kids. So it's funny that they are attuned to the idea that it would be a bad choice for you to deny them getting service based on their religious beliefs, but then they're going to turn around and based on theirs not allow someone else service to it.
It adopts the Russell Amendment and instructs all agencies of the federal government to provide protections and exemptions consistent with the Civil Rights Act and Americans with Disabilities Act to all religious organizations that contract with the federal government or receive grants.
Yeah.
I mean, so that would seem good because you would have protections and exemptions that would be consistent, that would be given to all religious organizations that contract with the federal government. So I don't know how bad that one would be.
I think of the group, it's one of the worst based on the exemptions. We're talking about giving people exemptions for cuckoo bird unprovable things. I reject it on its face. You can't say I don't want to give someone contraception because of my religious beliefs to it if I'm paying in a single payer system. If we ever move to a single payer system, that's the next fight we have to fight because we're laying out the groundwork for it right now. I think that the exemptions is what I actually draw the biggest problem from. It is odd to me that this is a group that particularly, and I know I'm speaking of the Christian group here, and this might be a little offensive, but this is a group that particularly talks about, bootstraps and pull yourself up and do your own hard work and no exemptions, no cut corners, but they want exemption city when it comes to having to pay their fair share of government tax.
Is it like snowflakes needing a safe place?
Yes. It's
without
it's without a doubt a call for a religious safe space in one that doesn't even allow the government into it.
It's the public space.
And it's a public space.
Yeah, it's public space.
And so it's my whole thing is, again, what you do privately in your own home is one thing too. And you can go into the marketplace and express your ideas. What you can't do is get special exemptions based on your ideas. And especially if those ideas can't be proven. The reasons why you believe it can't be proven and you get special exemption. I just don't buy it. I think it's a weak argument for why people should get exemptions.
I think this is an interesting one. It instructs the Secretary of the Treasury to ensure that it does not revoke nonprofit tax status because a religious organization's ordinary religious speech deals with politics, or because it speaks or acts on the belief that marriage is the union of a husband and wife, or that a person's sex is based on immutable biology, or that life begins at conception.
Yeah.
Now, these actually deal with a whole bunch of different religions, in fact. This wouldn't just be Christianity. In fact, this would seem to be most of the major religions and most of the religious people in the country. But it kind of is right on that line of endorsement. And we're already there, man. I mean, when I worked for New Jersey League of American Families, we'd go into churches all the time. You know, we would talk about politics and elections. We wouldn't wink tell people who to vote for, but check out our voters guide where the Republican has check marks on everything and the other person has angry and sad faces. So, you know, if you have a voters guide,
yeah,
that's got Republican on one side with tons of check marks and the other side that has those really angry red-faced emojis, and that's all it is, and you go, we're not endorsing anybody, wink. That's kind of there. But now, would this be in they say politics and ordinary speech, but I don't think that we are at some kind of place in America where ordinary conversation about politics is the same thing as endorsing a candidate, even in a church. And churches do this all the time. All the time.
You know, maybe I'm not seeing the full argument here, the full gambit of it, but I don't really see a whole problem in letting pastors endorse. Maybe you have a bigger issue with it, but when I look at it and I see pastors in their church who endorse a certain candidate, it's not like we don't know who most of those people are voting for based on what their rhetoric is anyway. Like if Jerry Falwell, right, we knew during the times of Jerry Falwell didn't have to tell people publicly who he was going to vote for people to know that he was going to be voting conservative and whoever was going to align with Christian values. I mean, it's a pretty easy assumption.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, part of me is just inherently opposed to, you know, allowing this kind of a thing. And yet at the same time, I'm like, you know, unions, nonprofit organizations, we know who they're voting for.
Absolutely.
I mean, and if that's not an endorsement, fine. You know?
Yeah, well, yes.
I mean, yeah.
Exactly right.
And so you've got all these, and they all use group pressures to kind of draw in their people. Incentivizations, right? Involvement, access to the organization, that you are part of the team, right? That you are a trusted individual. You're not a free rider. I mean, all of these pressures, psychologically, sociologically, it's the same thing inside of churches. Now they can add a special layer of nonsense because they're invoking things that would be unreal. You know, I mean, it would be one thing to say, listen, man, the societal pressure of a union that looks at a member and says, listen, man, if you don't vote for this candidate, we're going to lose our jobs. And the flip side of that, the Christian group saying, if you don't vote for this candidate, there's a good possibility that Yahweh is really ticked at you and you're going to burn forever in hell.
Yes.
There is a difference between these things. And one of those things could actually be empirically demonstrated. The other one cannot, and is much scarier and lasts actually for all time and not just, you know, until you fix it.
That's right.
And so the pressures within a religion to influence people's minds. But listen, people, that's their choice. I mean, largely they choose whether it's because they were conditioned that way, whether it's because of societal pressures. That's still, they wake up and they go.
Yes.
I mean, nobody's like putting the gun to their head and saying, you better go right now.
They do it one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, it might be a invisible gun, an eternal bullet.
But that's why, too, the endorsement thing, it doesn't bother me for the endorsements, but it does bother me if people want to have the government exclusion. If they want to have certain rights that other groups don't have, or they want to be exempt from certain, particularly financial responsibilities that they have with the government, I think it's a joke. The example of Scientology is the best example that we have, what I was talking about before. The celebration they had when they went tax exempt, when they got tax-free status. That's the biggest party Scientology has ever thrown, because that's the end game goal, is to work within a system that's based upon belief but doesn't pay into the system. And any parts of the system that you can disagree with, if you can raise your hand and say, I want exemption from that based on, sorry to be offensive, but based on my sky god or based on the imaginary friend I have, then you've got some serious problems in practical reality with paying for fiscal issues.
When we get back, we're talking to comedian Mike Logan. He's totally in the studio, Joe.
Yes, in studio. It's going to be a great fun time. Stick around, folks. 616-656-1680. We will be right back.
Now back to Joe and Jeremiah.
Welcome back to Paleo Radio, 95.3 FM, 1680 AM, where all your dreams, hopes, and wishes come true.
Yes, and today is officially number 63, a reason why Paleo Radio is the number one live call-in talk radio morning show in Grand Rapids every Monday from 10 to noon.
Thank you for being uber specific on that one. I love it. So that makes it true, because we were so exact on the statement.
Yeah,
there.
Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook. Yeah, Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, they still need to make amends on this, because they labeled that fake news, and that's just obviously ridiculous. It's so hyper-qualified. There's no way it's fake.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
With that huge, deep, thundering voice that you guys heard, this is our friend Mike Logan is in studio. Mike, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. Good.
Good. Mike is a comedian from Detroit who has also participated in Laugh Fest. He's done comedy all across the Midwest. We just wanted to bring you in, talk about Laugh Fest, talk about Funniest Person in Grand Rapids, and then maybe get some political opinions from you.
God, I love talking politics.
Oh, yeah.
I love it so much.
Yeah, especially maybe you can talk about the Trump rally that you went to later on, which was an interesting time. But you were involved in Funniest Person in Grand Rapids, correct?
Yeah, I advanced to the semifinals of that competition.
Okay, and what is that competition in general?
So it's essentially a comedy competition where anybody can enter. Some people from out of state come too. It's not just people from Grand Rapids. All over Michigan they do it. And you go up, you get 7 or 8 minutes, I think. 8 minutes to do your time. They have crowd voting for one pick and a judge vote for the other pick. They advance to the semifinals, and the semifinalists advance to the finals, and the winner gets $1,500 cold hard cash.
That's right.
And bragging rights for at least a year.
Cash money. Do they give it in ones or in hundreds?
I think it's hundreds.
It's all splitty?
I think it's hundreds. You know, funny business. They want to show their might.
Just 1,500. I mean, that will be nice. I mean, it's a decently thick amount, but
you can put it in a briefcase at least, and it would look really impressive.
They should open it up in a briefcase, one little 15 stacks right there. That would be fantastic.
That would be
pull a dodgeball, dodgeball example there. That'd be great. So the Funniest Person in Grand Rapids competition, that lasts for a while, right?
It's a long time. It always feels like it lasts for a full year.
Yeah,
it's like a 6-month competition that started in what month is this? February. It started last month. I think the first round ends in April.
Yes.
So then you've got the semifinals after that, but then it goes pretty quickly after that. There's a lot of comedians that enter. It's usually like 150 comedians or something like that.
Yeah. How do they determine the winner?
The winner? Oh, so they have so in the first round they have 2 picks move on. So there's usually 8 comedians in each round. 2 picks move on. One is a crowd vote, and the other is a judge vote. The crowd vote is essentially whoever's most popular, they'll bring all their friends, and they'll crowd. Or if you're just ridiculously funny, the crowd likes you, and then you'll get the bulk of votes from that. And then this year they just started doing a judge's pick for the first round. So they always had a judge's pick for the finals, but they never had it for the first round before.
Okay.
So now they have the judges select. And I was actually the judge's choice when I advance. No big deal.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah,
yeah.
just kind of slipping that
humble
in.
brag. Humble brag.
Humble
here.
brag. Yeah.
Yes, but that's true though. There is a game to be played within a game when you're doing this one because, like you said, there's a crowd vote, and the people that are coming realize that they have one crowd vote. So when they're coming, for instance, the friends that are coming to go to watch Mike may not necessarily want to be laughing at me if I was to be doing it because they want one guy to go through.
This is true.
So you're playing a little bit of a game. So if you are genuinely funny, you get that judge vote. That's the one to pick up. So
It's kind of like
good
that
humble brag.
It's kind of like that Beavis and Butthead episode where they weren't allowed to laugh, and they were talking about sex ed.
There
And
you
so
go.
their faces, like all day long, they're just these excruciating faces holding in laughter because they can't get busted. It's kind of the same thing with you guys. Like you have a whole group of people just like tears coming out their eyes, holding it in.
That's not funny.
Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's easy. You know how it goes. So in terms of Laugh Fest is also going to be going on here in March. That's kicking up pretty quick, actually.
Yeah,
Wow.
Laugh Fest. Comedians in Grand Rapids love Laugh. We love
Yes.
Laugh Fest. It's 2 weeks of just comedy, and when you live in Grand Rapids, you can essentially go to so they have showcases where they have amateur and professionals doing comedy shows. And if you're in the comedy scene in Grand Rapids, you usually know who's hosting those shows. So you just show up to a venue, and they're like, "Hey, man, you want some time?" And then you're doing time during a actual comedy festival.
Wow.
Yes. And it was maybe it was, forgive me if it was last year or the year before, but Brian Posehn came and did the pyramid scheme. And that was one where, you just walk in there and you get to meet the guy.
Yeah.
How fantastic is that?
Yeah, Laugh Fest is great. It's I've been to a couple comedy festivals, and Laugh Fest is, I feel like, the most laid back, which isn't a slight to it, saying it's like they take it less seriously. But
sure.
Maybe it's because I live here. I think it might be it. But it just seems to me like it's just a fun time. The comics, even the big name comics, usually are very cool about talking with us little guys. And it's a fun environment. It's the whole city feels electric. It's like Christmas for joke tellers.
Yeah, it is.
How does Grand Rapids line up in the state
As far as
for
comedy scenes?
Yeah.
I'm gonna be super biased. There's pretty much, I think there's 3 comedies. Well, we'll say 4 comedy scenes in Michigan. There's Detroit, Lansing, Kalamazoo, and Grand Rapids. I feel like Detroit gets kind of the recognition because it's Detroit. They get they get on their news, they get on the newspapers and all that kind of stuff. Grand Rapids, though, we've got Dr. Grins. Roy Oak has got the Comedy Castle, and Ann Arbor has a showcase. But Ann Arbor is still a pretty small scene, which is weird because they have a pretty good comedy club there. But I feel like we have just a bigger variety of comedians, and we have Laugh Fest, and we have Gilda's Club, which is here. So I feel like our comedy scene, I feel like we have the best comedy scene.
Yeah.
Not just our comedians are better, but we just have a bigger selection. We have more open mics. It's a bigger scene. So in Michigan, I would say Grand Rapids is probably the best comedy scene.
Yeah. I agree with that too, being that we both work within it. We would believe that it's one of the best. No, but it's true. I think that Grand Rapids has a good diverse amount of comedy, and that's the kicker. And it's not to make it just the black-white issue, right? But I mean, Grand Rapids is a place where you can go to a comedy show and you're not going to get one or the other. You get a good mix of groups, and that actually, I think, makes it for more dynamic comedy, makes it a little bit better. For instance, like when I first started off, a lot of the shows I went to were predominantly people of my demographic.
Oh, it's still like that.
And it's still like that. Yeah, let's not pretend that Grand Rapids isn't predominantly white. But the other thing though too is I know that even my comedy and other people's, it doesn't play to, it's not all of race comedy, right? So
yeah.
what I'm joking about doesn't necessarily have to do with just the demographic of people that I'm within.
Yeah.
So we have an opportunity to get to more people in Grand Rapids, which I like. Detroit is another place that I want to go and get more involved in too. But
there's some great guys out in Detroit. Detroit's a good scene. It's they don't have a lot of open mics is the only problem with Detroit scene. They've got Detroit Comedy Underground, and they've got like the suburbs, like Port Huron has Lynch's Irish Tavern. Shout out to Lynch's. It's a great place. Right. So I mean, they're getting there, and their comics that they have out there are really good. But I would say they have a smaller pool to draw from.
Gotcha.
I mean, we even have, I saw this, and I was going to mention, just driving around town, you've got all the billboards that you can go from Kalamazoo all the way up to Big Rapids, and you've got this block of space there on the highway where just billboard after billboard throughout the year of events ranging from kind of lower level all the way up to your premier primetime people. And I saw this just laying around. You have Love to Laugh Comedy Festival. It's going to be at DeVos Hall too. You know, and so you're talking about the diverse array of comedians that come in. I mean, you've got stuff ranging from stuff you'd see at Branson, all the way to your wiener and bud jokes.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're eating at 5 in the afternoon your pot roast dinner in Branson, Missouri.
That's right. But you do get a good mix. I think if you are a newer comedian or someone who's trying to start out, Grand Rapids is a good place because just like you said, Mike, there's so many open mics. So Tip Top. There's Holiday Bar. There's Sunday Night Funnies. There's tons of them.
And I think the location of Grand Rapids works out beautifully because I mean you're at least or at the most 2.5 hours from South Bend, Indiana, Ohio, Chicago, Detroit. If you want to go to Northern Michigan, Lansing, this is the middle of all of the Midwest comedy scene, in my opinion. That's just geographical, not my opinion. So I think it's a great city for that. Whereas when you're in Detroit, you're pretty far from Chicago. You're pretty far from Indiana. Well, not pretty far, but you're relatively farther than Grand Rapids. So I think it's just centrally located, and it's just a great city. So much beer.
Yeah. Well, that also helps with the comedy, too. Beer. Heavy on the beer.
Beer. Not too heavy. If you go too heavy, it does not help the comedy.
No, it doesn't.
You're going to be on for the next segment. We want to talk to you about some funny stories. But before we even close out this segment, how can people learn more about you, and how can they support you in your triumphant conquest to win the funniest person?
Well, that's an excellent question.
Yeah.
Well, you could go on my Facebook. I don't have a comedy page mainly because, like most comedians, I'm super lazy. But you can go on my personal Facebook page, which is doubling as my comedy page for now. I keep that pretty up to date on shows that I'm going to do. You can follow me on Twitter at Ice Cold Comedian. My Instagram is also Ice Cold Comedian. But my Instagram isn't so much comedy as much as I just like taking pictures. And
me too.
I think I'm better than I probably am.
That's good.
So I put them on
we all
Instagram.
have a high. It's good to have high self-esteem. Let's just put it that way.
I took a picture. I went through my old photos on Instagram. I took a picture of it was like 3 semi-truck trailers with graffiti on them.
Yes.
And I put the filters on and
so you're like art.
And I'm like, oh, I'm from the city. I'm so urban.
I saw this.
So stupid.
Yes. It was. You framed it in your mind. You had the artistic vision.
In my mind, it looked better.
I can't help but to think about it, but when you said taking pictures of semi-trucks and trailers, I took a picture of this semi-truck in Dorr that had this, it looked like Thor or some kind of Odin figure coming down on a white unicorn, and it was about Jesus. It was basically a buff, very Nordic Jesus on a white unicorn. I still have that somewhere.
Amazing.
Well, I would have snapped that photo myself.
I would paint that picture.
It sounds like an opportunity you just can't miss.
Yeah, dude, it's great. I got to share that. We got to do that over at facebook.com/PaleoRadio. And, of course, we encourage everybody to go up and make sure to like the page and to set it to see first. And that way you never miss out on a thing.
Yes, that's right. And so just real quick, Mike, how long have you been doing comedy?
I think about 4.5 years.
4.5.
Yeah.
What got you started into it? You just want to try it, or was it something you always wanted to do, or something that you kind of stumbled upon?
I always have been relatively funny and super modest, and and I just figured I might as well try to get paid to do it.
Dude, I love it. I love the honesty. That's great. Well, yeah, you'll be able to stick around for the next segment as well, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We'll be talking about funny stories. We'll also try to be talking about the U.S. threatening to invade Mexico. Maybe we can get
Mexico,
into that.
and we apparently now have real problems with Australia.
Who hates Australia?
Yes.
Hey, it happened.
Yeah, Australia made a bungled deal, right?
Yeah, it lasted 25 minutes.
Yeah.
The phone call with Trump was set for an hour, lasted 25 minutes, and did not end cordially.
You know what would really defend Trump's point about it not being a Muslim ban is if he threw Australia in there, too. That would really just throw everyone for a quick loop. But stick around, folks. We'll be right back with Mike Logan in studio. Paleo Radio, 95.3 FM, 1680 AM. And as always, you can call in 616-656-1680.
For debates, interviews, or speeches, contact PaleoRadio Show at gmail.com.
You love to hate 'em, you hate to love 'em. You just can't get enough of them, you sick freaks. Paleo Radio's on the air.
Chain vaping like a chimney here. Whew. It's true, totally true. Looking through smoke that I can basically cut with a knife. We're here on Paleo Radio every Monday from 10 to noon, totally live. You can give us a call, 616-656-1680. But we are now in about the last 12 minutes of the program, and this is where, because we're jabberjaws and we just talk a lot, we don't get through all the topics, and we try to basically slam a bunch of them there in the end. And we call it a rapid fire or some kind of flurry. We just make it up on the fly, basically, as an excuse. It's all ad hoc. But right here, and we've got with us, we have Mike Logan. He's a comedian hailing from Detroit, but living in Grand Rapids, correct?
This is accurate.
This is accurate. All right. Okay. All right. Well, we got him with us for this. This is going to be a bunch of fun. The first story, Joe and Mike, is man phones police from roof of speeding car to thwart thief. This is by Brian Love. We got to get this guy on the show. Edited by Catherine Evans. It's over at Reuters. A man clung onto the roof of his father's stolen car and called police on his mobile phone during an 80-mile-per-hour motorway chase before the thief was arrested. Osama Akuli, who was largely unscathed after the late-night chase near France's border with Switzerland on Sunday, told French media his reaction was spontaneous. He said, "I told myself this was my father's car and that it meant a lot to him."
Yeah, okay.
They say it lasted for several minutes.
How much is that car worth, you think?
Oh, that's the question. What kind of car was it?
I bet it was
a 1960s Gremlin.
I refuse to believe that anybody who has that much money, if they had a nice car, clearly they got enough money to buy a new car if it gets stolen.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. If it's a heavy money, like you got a Lambo or whatever, yeah, you can afford to buy another one.
This guy clearly did not have full coverage.
No. He was like, my PLPD. And he just dove on that sucker.
I've always wondered, man, what would it be like in the moment, existentially, to just be driving down the road and all of a sudden your car just gets slammed from the side and you look over and there's a really angry person, like, screaming and yelling obscenities and shaking their fist at you, and you're like, whoa, and you're in this crazy situation with a violent car. And I thought, similar with this, I said, what would it be like in the moment, like to be that guy, holding on to the car that's trying to get away at 80 miles an hour with the wind blowing in your face, and you're calling 911 from the top of a car?
I would have them on speakerphone while I'm Snapchatting the whole situation.
That's right.
Because there's no way I wouldn't be documenting that.
You're like getting your face in the camera. Hello, police, this is me. Right. It's exactly how it would be. On top of that, we heard that there may have been the fastest or longest pass of all time, a football pass, right?
Yeah.
Throwing a ball there in space.
By Calla Cofield, Space.com, has a NASA astronaut set a new record for the longest football pass in history. A new video shot in orbit abroad the International Space Station, this is for you all flat earthers, captured the incredible feat. The space station orbits the Earth at a speed of about 17,500 miles an hour, so obviously super duper fast. Therefore, when astronaut Tim Kopra gently tossed a football down the length of the station, the ball was technically covering about 8,800 yards per second as measured by someone standing on Earth.
There you are.
Yeah, a total travel of 564,664 yards.
So that's by far the longest pass of all time.
It is by far better than Tom Brady threw for in the first half last night.
That's right, yes.
Yeah.
Certainly is. Certainly is, yeah.
That's
Tom
better
came
than
up
Boomer
to play in the
Esiason.
second half, but first half,
Yeah.
Not,
That's better than Boomer Esiason, Joe. I don't even know if Boomer could do that.
No.
Yeah.
Boomer probably would have to take 2 throws to go that far.
Joe Montana.
He's gotta warm up.
He's one warm-up throw and then his real throw, and then he could get the 5,000-yard
I could
throw.
see him only throwing like 80 yards the first time. Be like, hold on, I'm not loose. And then just launching it for a planetary circle.
Exactly. Just do a couple arm stretches afterwards and then just boom that sucker.
All right, let's go to the phones real quick. Why not? We have Jim. He's calling from Comstock, listening on streaming. How are you, Jim?
I'm good. Just a couple of things I wanted to chime in you guys were talking about. Number one, Tom freaking Brady, greatest of all time. I think that can be reasonable.
Yep, he's Rocky Balboa.
But,
just go for a day.
Yep.
But you guys were talking about Trump talking to Australia. Australia is not sending their best people over here.
What? They're bringing
They're
drugs.
kangaroo dealers or something. I don't know.
They're dirty Vegemite sandwiches.
We've heard they're trying to bring in marsupials, right? It's
Exactly.
gross.
The marsupials
Maybe
are
even
packaging
crocodiles.
Foster's cans in their pouches. It's just unacceptable.
Sorry, what was that you were saying?
I just say, I'm a Michigan fan, so I'm supposed to like Tom Brady, but apparently he's a Trump guy.
He is.
Oh,
He
big
is a
time.
Trump guy.
Big time
yeah.
Trump guy.
He's not
Him
even
and-
closeted
Him
about
and
it.
Belichick. Yep.
Yeah, Belichick is big time.
Of course.
And how many times did we have to see Mike Pence last night at the football game?
Ugh.
Yeah, and he has the most terrible thumbs up ever. That's his go-to move is this thumbs up, and he points his thumb down at people. He's a terrible person.
He acts like a 60-year-old white man. Is his problem.
And indeed he is.
Comes with the age race.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the phone call so much, Jim.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Doomsday.
Oh, yes, the Doomsday Clock has
Doomsday
been
Clock.
moved forward.
I never even realized that was actually a real thing.
Oh, yeah.
Until 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, they actually have a clock that they move closer
So
to closer to when civilization is going to burn and end. It's something.
And there's an interesting backstory with this, too. For the first time in its history, the Doomsday Clock, an imaginary timepiece that represents humanity's proximity to annihilation through mechanisms of our own design, has moved 30 seconds closer to calamity. With the minute hand now at 2.5 minutes to midnight, the bulletin of the atomic scientists announced this morning. This is January 26th.
So, the thing about this is, it's almost like threat levels, like terrorist threat level colors and all that. It's just made up, isn't it? We're 2.5 minutes to destruction, but we're going to move it 30 seconds closer if you don't behave. What an arbitrary thing! I understand what their concept is. It doesn't. It doesn't seem to make its point with me.
I feel like if we're that self-aware of our own impending destruction, why don't we just stop doing what we're doing to get there?
That's right.
Like
Why do we need a clock?
It's we're 2 to midnight. Hey, let's stop hating each other. Cool. All right, boom. Let's get rid of that clock.
That's right.
It does kind of read that way, and I thought what was interesting about this, and they say that it's for multiple reasons. They mentioned Lawrence Krauss, director of the Origins Project at Arizona State University. They talk about cyber technology, biotechnology being involved, and, of course, climate change.
Yes.
But I thought what was interesting, man, is the Doomsday Clock, and this is in the article, and we didn't even say the name of the article, but it's Mindy Weisberger over at Live Science. If that's how is it live or is it live?
I believe it's live
It
science.
seems like it would be live.
Is it live
I feel like
science?
it's live.
Yeah, it just sounds like it would be weird if it's live science.
Yeah.
That'd be
I think it's
weird.
live science.
So the Doomsday Clock was created in 1947 as a cover illustration for the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, a journal founded in 1945 by researchers who worked on the Manhattan Project. And I thought, wait a second, isn't that the conspiracy group? The Manhattan Engineer District, MED. I was like, that's
so.
It is. I went back and looked, and lo and behold, it's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
It was led at the time by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, General Leslie Groves, and physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer. And so they.
Well, Oppenheimer.
I thought it was just really interesting. I'm like, wait a second, man. So this is the Manhattan Project. I think that's wrapped up in conspiracy,
That's
Alex
right.
Jones land.
Yeah, that's the blue guy with his wiener out, right? Yeah.
For Harambe.
That's right. Oh, man. Going into the article, continuing on, it says government inaction in the face of climate change has also played a part in the board's decision to nudge the clock hand forward. And this is according to David Titley, who is a professor in practice of meteorology in Pennsylvania State University. He suggested that the new Trump administration should waste no time affirming that it is accepted, that it is incontroversial about scientific evidence that climate change is happening and that it's driven by human activity. Mm-hmm. So that alone is moving us a little bit closer. The fact that we have an incoming administration that doesn't really think that it's a fact so much as a hoax made up by the Chinese.
I feel like the Trump administration is like, as a collective, kind of like a 6-year-old kid in the mindset of like, the more we tell them something, they're like, no, we're not going to believe that. Like we're like, hey, no, look at these facts. Like, no, it's not true. I don't care what you say.
No, it's
I
true.
have the best eyes. I can read everything. I read what you're saying, but I don't like it. I'm going to change it and do whatever I want.
Yep, it's absolutely true.
Like I could picture Trump, like I picture Steve Bannon giving Trump like a plate of mac and cheese and being like, eat your mac and cheese. He's like, I don't like this.
And
Slaps
it
off
doesn't
the
have
table.
hot dogs.
Doesn't
I like hot dogs
I like
in my
it
mac and
sliced
cheese.
up, sliced up very fine, very thin, fine, like all the women I've been with.
Well, no, I think that the problem is it's pride. I mean, on a real level, it's pride that he said something about not believing it years and years ago, and I think he's got a thing for owning up to thinking or saying he was wrong then, and so he's just gonna double down on, I'm sticking with it's crap, And I it's detrimental to run a country that way. It flies in the face of science, which is a worry. I think we're at a time now where I didn't ever believe we would have to have climate change data have to get doubled down and saved on servers just to protect it from the incoming administration. That's a little bit odd. I think we're dealing with the same way that climate change has been dealt with is the same way that tobacco dealt with knowing that tobacco caused cancer. Yeah. You just cause enough doubt to say that the jury's not out while you can continue to do whatever you need to do, which is, in their case, was sell cigarettes, and in this case, it's pump as much oil out of the ground as you can before you have to pay taxes on it. And I think that's the end game. It's sad.
We're glad to have you, Mike. It's been a bunch of fun. I'm really glad that that we were able to have you, that you could talk about Laugh Fest, the funniest comic, and just to have you just here and talking about these hilarious stories, like riding on top of a car at 80 miles an hour.
I want to do that so bad. I just want to be on top of a car now.
Yeah.
I just want to.
We got to get a video.
Yes, that's right. But again, thank you, Mike Logan, for joining us. Joe Elder, Jeremiah Bannister, PaleoRadio. Yes. We will be back next week, as always, with a whole new set of topics. The ones that you didn't like, we won't cover. The ones that you loved, we'll cover again. It's going to be everything you want and more.
Yep.
Stick around next week.
Make sure to follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/PaleoRadio, and find us on Spreaker and iTunes at Paleo Radio Show.
And if you really like the show, you can contribute at patreon.com/Paleo Radio Show. Thank you again, Mike, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, you guys.
All right.
And we will see you all next week.
Good night.
A different direction from commercial talk radio. This is Public Reality Radio, WPRR 1680 AM Ada, 95.3 FM Grand Rapids, WPRR FM 90.1 FM Clyde Township, and WPJC 88.3 FM Pontiac.